Microeconomics Theory. Chapter Name 1. Microeconomy. 2. Law of Demand. 3. Indifference Curve and Consumers' Surplus. 4. Elasticity of Demand. 5. Production Theory. 6. Difference Markup Structure. 7. Rent. 8. Interest. 9. Profit. 10. Theories of Distribution. 11. Unsolved Papers 2011, 2007. Microeconomics Theory. Chapter I. Microeconomy. Subjective type question Q.1. Economics is A. The study of the markets for stocks and bonds. B. The study of choice under conditions of scarcity. C. Exclusively the study of business firms. D. Fundamentally the same as sociology. Correct answer B. Q.2. The terms microeconomics and macroeconomics were coined by A. Ragnar Frisch. C. J.R. Hicks. Correct answer A. B. Lord Keynes. D. Marshall. Q.3. Price. There is also called by another name. A. Macroeconomics. B. Price control. C. Public finance. D. Microeconomic. Correct answer D. Q.4. In a free enterprise economy, the problems of what, how and for whom are solved by A. A planning committee. B. The elected representatives of two people. C. The price mechanism. D. None of the above. Correct answer C. Q.5. We consume more of a commodity, its total utility. A. Increase at a diminishing rate. B. Decrease at a diminishing rate. C. Remains the same. D. Falls to zero. Correct answer A. Q.6. The marginal utility of a particular commodity at the point of saturation is A. Zero. B. Unity. C. Negative. Correct answer A. D. Positive. Q.7. When demand curve is vertical, it represents A. Unitary elastic demand. B. Perfectly elastic demand. C. Perfectly inelastic demand. D. Relatively elastic demand. Correct answer C. Q.8. Utility analysis is called by other name. A. Cardinal approach. B. Ordinal approach. C. Price theory. D. None. Correct answer A. Q.9. The three groups of decision-makers in the economy are A. Households, business firms, and banks. B. Households, business firms, and governments. C. Business firms, governments, and banks. D. Business firms, banks, and foreign traders. Correct answer B. Q.9. The three groups of decision-makers in the economy are A. Households, business firms, and banks. B. Households, business firms, and governments. C. Business firms, governments, and banks. D. Business firms, banks, and foreign traders. Correct answer B. Q.10. Senior citizens deserve an income that will allow them to live in comfort for their remaining years. This is A. Neither a normative nor a positive statement. B. Both a positive and a normative statement. C. A positive statement. D. A normative statement. Correct answer D. Long answer type question. Q.1. Define micro and macroeconomics. A and S. Microeconomics word is derived from Greek word mikros, which means small. Macroeconomics is derived from Greek word makros, which means large. Microeconomic the only studies the economic behavior of individual decision-making units such as individual consumers, resource owners and business firms, and the operation of individual markets in a free enterprise economy. This is to be contrasted with macroeconomic theory, which studies A. the total or aggregate level of output and national income, and B. the level of national employment, consumption, investment and prices for the economy viewed as a whole. Both microeconomics and macroeconomics provide very useful tools of analysis, and both are important. While macroeconomics often makes the headlines, microeconomics attempts to explain some of the most important economic and social problems of the day. These range from the high cost of energy to welfare programs, environment pollution, rent control, minimum wages, safety regulations, rising medical costs, monopoly, discrimination, labor unions, wages and leisure, crime and punishment, taxation and subsidies, and so on. Microeconomics focuses attention on two broad categories of economic units, household and business firms, and it examines the operation of two types of markets, the market for goods and services and the market for economic recourse. The interaction of households and business firms in the markets for goods and services and in the markets for economic resources represents the core of the free enterprise economic system. Specifically, households own the labor, the capital, the land and the natural resources that business firms require to produce the goods and service households want. Business firms pay to households wages, salaries, interest, rents and so on, for the services and resources that households provide. Household then use the income that they receive from business firms to purchase the goods and services produced by business firms. The income of households are the production costs of business firms. The expenditure of households are the receipts of business firms. The so-called circular flow of economic activity is complete. Business firms, households, economic resources, market for resources, money incomes. The inner loop shows the flow of resources from households to business firms and shows the flow of goods and services from business firms to households. The outer loop shows the flow of money incomes from business firms to households and shows the flow of consumption expenditure from households to business firms. The prices of goods and services are determined in the top half of the figure, and the prices of resources are determined in the bottom half of the figure. Q. To differentiate between positive and normative analysis. A and S. Positive analysis studies what is. It is concerned with how the economic system performs the basic functions of what to produce, how to produce, for whom to produce, how it provides for growth and how it rations the available supply of a good over time. In other words, how is the price of a commodity, service or resource actually determined in the market? How do producers combine resource to minimize cost of production? How do the number of firms in a market and the type of product they produce affect the determination of the price and quantity sold of the commodity? How do the number and type of owners and users of a resource affect the price and quantity sold of the commodity? How do the number and type of owners and users of a resource affect the price and quantity of the resource placed on the market? How do specific taxes and subsidies affect the production and consumption of various commodities and use of various resources? What are two effects of minimum wages on employment and income? The level of real wages on work and leisure. Rent control on the availability of housing. Deregulation of gas on gas price and consumption. How does the economic system provide for the growth of the nation? All of these and many more topics fall within the area of positive analysis for the most part. Positive analysis is factual or hypothetically testable and objective in nature, and it is devoid of ethical or value judgments. Normative analysis, on the other hand, studies what ought to be. It is concerned with how the basic economic functions should be performed. Normative analysis is thus based on value judgment and as such is subjective and controversial, whereas positive analysis is independent of normative analysis. Normative analysis is based on positive analysis and the value judgment of society. Controversies in positive analysis can be and are usually resolved by the collection of more or better markup data. On the other hand, controversies in normative analysis usually are not and cannot be resolved. Q.3. Define utility or cardinal approach. A and S. Introduction. Demand analysis studies the behavior of individual consumers. Adam Smith, in his famous book Wealth of Nations 1776, used the concepts of value in use and value in exchange. He pointed out the value in exchange is actual price which a consumer pays for a commodity, and value in use is the actual satisfaction the consumer derived from its consumption. The theory of consumers further developed by the contribution of Professor William Stanley Walsh and Carl Manger, who are known as utilitarian. The credit goes to Professor Alfred Marshall, who contributed to the theory of consumer behavior the latest developments which were included in his book Principles of Economics in 1890. Prod. Marshall and his contemporary economists are known as neoclassical economists. There are several determinants for the demand of a commodity, namely price of commodity, income, price of related goods, habit, volume of credit, fashion, advertisement and sales promotion, population, credit policy. It is not easy to include all these determinants in the demand analysis. However, some major elements can be studied, namely price of a commodity, income, price of related goods, advertisements, etc. Law of diminishing marginal utility is the oldest law of demand. Professor Marshall has contributed to the marginal utility approach, and several laws of economics have been proposed on the basis of the analysis. They are: 1. Law of diminishing marginal utility. 2. Law of equi-marginal utility. 3. Consumers' surplus. 4. Law of demand. Meaning and definition of utility. Utility is defined as the want-satisfying power of a commodity or service. The utility from a commodity differs from one person to another. It means it is subjective by nature. Prophet Alfred Marshall. The utility of a thing to a person at a time is measured by the extent to which it satisfies his wants. Salient feature of utility: 1. Not related with usefulness or welfare. 2. Utility is measurable. 3. Utility is a relative term and absolute, and based on its relative importance affected by the want-satisfying power. 4. Utility is subjective. Utility of a commodity is determined by several factors such as mentality, tastes of a consumer, economic, social and religious environment, etc. 5. Utility depends on the intensity of want. 6. Utility is concerned with consumer goods only. 7. Utility does not mean actual consumption. 8. Utility has no physical shape. It depends on the mental state of a consumer. 9. Marginal utility of money remains constant. 10. Rationality of the consumer. Measurement of utility. 2 approaches to utility analysis. 1. Cardinal approach to utility. 2. Ordinal approach to utility. Marshall and other neoclassical economists have developed and advocated this approach to utility. Money is the measuring rod of utility. The method of measuring utility in terms of numbers is called cardinal approach. We can measure the utility in terms of money. Utility can be added, subtracted and multiplied with the help of this method in cardinal NOS, like 1, 2, 3, 4 and so on. Ordinal approach to utility according to ordinal economists like J.R. Hicks, R.G.D. Allen, F.Y. Ashworth and Vilfredo Pair 2. Utility is not cardinally measurable and it can be measured in ordinal numbers like I and so on. These economists put forward the following arguments against the cardinal measurement of utility. By utility is a psychological and subjective concept which cannot be measured. The mental state and attitude of each individual go under change frequently. Hence, utility is not measurable and pointed by modern economists. The measuring rod of utility, as put forward by Professor Alfred Marshall, is money, which is not a stable and exact measurement as we find in case of natural and physical sciences. Q.4. Define kinds of utility and their relationship. They and S. Kinds of utility. 1. Total utility TU. 2. Marginal utility mu. 3. Average utility O. TU equals utility derived from the consumption of all units of a commodity. Mu equals the addition to TU by consuming an additional unit of a commodity by the consumer. Mu x. TUX QX. Where MUX equals marginal utility of X commodity. TUX is the change in total utility of commodity X. QX equals change in consumption of commodity X. Average utility O equals utility derived by dividing the number of units of a commodity to the total utility derived by the consumer. Or O equals TU/number of units. Relationship between TU and mu. There is a close relationship between TU and mu, because the summation of mu's is the total utility derived from various units of a commodity. Mu equals TU. Q.5. Define law of diminishing marginal utility. They and S. Consumers' behavior with single commodity. Human wants are unlimited, resources are limited and they have alternative uses. A particular want can be satisfied with a point of time and all the wants cannot be satisfied at all. Definition and explanation of the law. Marshall. The additional benefit which a person derives from a given increase if a stock of a thing diminishing, other thing being equal, with every increase in the stock that we already has. Explanation of the law. Explanation of the law. Causes of operating the law. 1. Satiety of a want. 2. The intensity of want declines. 3. No perfect substitutes of goods. 4. Nature of human behavior. 5. Variety of uses. Assumptions of the law. 1. All the units of the commodity should be homogeneous. 2. Adequate and suitable quantity of consumption. 3. Continuity in consumption. 4. No change in the mental state of consumers. 5. Income, habit, taste and preference of the consumer do not change. 6. Price of the commodity and its related goods remains constant. 7. Want should be a single one and not multiple want. 8. Applies to pleasure economy only. 9. Marginal utility of money remains constant. Exceptions to the law. 1. Consumption of very small units of the commodity. 2. Rare commodities, monuments and antiques. 3. Classical music, sales, poems, etc. 4. Complementary goods. 5. Miser men. 6. Alcoholic drinks. 7. Increase in the number of users or consumers. 8. Personal hobbies. Importance of the law. A theoretical importance. I. Law of demand. I. Law of equity. Marginal utility. I. Consumers surplus. The theory of pricing. B. Practical importance. I. Basis of production. I. Importance in public finance. I. Basis of socialist system of wealth distribution. The value in use and value in exchange is explained. Criticisms of the law. 1. Utility is not measurable. Marginal utility of money does not remain constant. Based on subjectivity. V. Ignores macroanalysis. V. Ignores other effects. Q.6. Explain the law of equity. Marginal utility. A and S. The law of equity. Marginal utility is based on the law of diminishing marginal utility. This law operates when different units of different commodities are consumed and consumer tries to maximize his satisfaction with his given resources. The law is called the law of substitution. The consumer should allocate his resources on different units of different commodities that in the last the use of each commodity is equalized. Professor Marshall, if a person has thing which can be put to several uses, he will distribute it among these uses in such a way that it has the same use in all. If it had a greater use in one use than another, he would gain by taking some of it from second use and applying it to the first. Explanation of the law. Consumer arranges his wants in order of intensity, and the order of satisfaction is arranged on the basis of intensity of these wants and goes in satisfying his wants till the mu of all the goods equalized in proportion to money spent on them. In this manner, B can maximizes his satisfaction. Assumptions of the law. 1. Rationality of the consumers. 2. Utility is measurable. 3. Constant marginal utility of money. 4. Operation of the law of diminishing mu. 5. Taste, preference, fashion and income of consumers do not change. 6. No change in the prices of related goods. 7. Divisibility of goods. 8. The period of income and expenditure of the consumer is the same. Multiple commodities equilibrium condition. Mud muck. Mud I. Pod PBPC. PN In the above equation mu, mud, muck, and so on are the marginal utilities of A, B and C commodities. Mu is mu of nth commodity, pod, PB, and PC are prices of A, B, C commodities. PN is the quantities consumed of A, B, C commodities. QN is quantity of the nth commodity. Microeconomics theory. Y equals money income of the consumer. Scope and importance of the law. It applies to all economic areas. 1. Theory of consumer behavior. 1 mud PBQA pod QP BY money income. 2. Theory of production. Producers equilibrium equals MPPL equals plural MPTK park or MPPL equals MPTK plural park. 3. Theory of exchange. Mu, mud, for ram equals for sheep, mud mu. This clearly shows that both ram and sheep well stop their exchange as they have attained the objective of equalizing the marginal gain in the process of exchange. For theory of distribution, according to marginal productivity theory of distribution, each factor and production will get the share on the basis of its marginal productivity from the NI pool. WMPPL equals firm is incurring loss, so the wages should be equal to MPPL. 5. Theory of public finance. MSS and MSB. MSS equals MSB. MSS. 0. Public revenue and expenditure limitations of law. 1. Indivisibility of goods. 2. Budget period is not definite. 3. Change in the prices of related goods. 4. Non-availability of goods. 5. Imaginary and unrealistic assumptions. 6. Psychological and subjective law. 7. Ignores income effect and substitution effect. 8. Ignorance and laziness of consumers. Chapter II. Law of demand and supply. Subjective type questions. Q.1. Where is a demand curve considered as rectangular hyperbola? A e greater than 1. B equals 1 at all points. C 1. D equals 0. Correct answer B. Q.2. By inferior good we mean A. Demand falls with the rise in price. B. Demand falls with the fall in price. C. No effect of the change in price. D. Demand rise with the fall in price. Correct answer C. Q.3. Which of the following is not the exception of law of demand? A. Articles of distinction. B. Given goods. C. Ignorance. D. Normal goods. Correct answer D. Q. For when an individual's income rises while everything else remains constant, his demand for normal goods A. rises, B. falls, C. remains the same, D. any of the above. Correct answer A. Q. 5 When the price of a substitute of commodity X falls, demand for X A. rises, B. falls, C. remains unchanged, D. any of the above. Correct answer B. Q. 6 When we know the quantity of a product that buyers wish to purchase at each possible price, we know A. demand, B. supply, C. excess demand, D. excess supply. Correct answer A. Q. 7 The demand curve can shift because of changing A. incomes, B. tastes, C. price of related goods, D. all of the above. Correct answer D. Long answer type question. Q. 1 Explain law of demand. A and S. Meaning, in economics, demand means that a commodity demanded at a given price in given period. Demand and want are synonyms in the ordinary sense of the term, but in economics they are different. Want has three elements as given below. I. effective desire, I. adequate resources, and I. ready to spend these resources on wants. If any of the element is missing, then it cannot be called a want. Profit income has defined, the demand for any time at a given price is the amount of it which will be bought per unit of time at that price. Characteristics of demand. 1. It is related with an effective desire. 2. It is related with a particular quantity. 3. It is related with a particular price. 4. It is related with a particular time. Demand schedule. When the quantity demanded of a commodity at different prices at a particular time is presented in the form of a table, it is called demand schedule. The demand schedule expresses the functional relationship between the price of a commodity and its quantity demanded. Such demand schedules are of two types as given below. I. Individual demand schedule. I. Markup demand schedule. Individual demand schedule. An individual demand schedule deals with the price of a commodity and its quantity demanded by an individual consumer at a particular time. Markup demand schedule. It is aggregates of all individual demand schedules. We take the quantity demanded of a commodity of different buyers at different price levels. The demand schedules depict the following facts. I. Demand schedules are formulated in the tabular form on the assumptions of other things being equal. Income, taste, habit, and fashion of a consumer do not change. Price changes. I. Demand schedules are imaginary. I. Markup demand schedules are simpler than those of individual demand schedules. IV demand schedule are affected by the time element. V. There is imperfect competition in the market. VI. Population and transport facilities also affect the demand schedules. Demand curve. When the demand for a commodity at different prices is shown in graphical form, we will get a line or curve which is called demand curve, as shown below. The demand curve DD shows an inverse relationship between the price of a commodity and its quantity demanded. Law of demand. According to the law, other things being equal, with the increase in the prices, the quantity demanded of a commodity will decrease, and with the decrease in the price, the quantity demanded will increase. Profit marshal. Caterist hatter booze. The greater the amount to be sold, the smaller must be the price at which it is offered in order that it may find purchasers, or in other words, the amount demanded increase with a fall in price and diminishes with a rise in price. Assumptions of the law. 1. Money income of the consumer does not change. 2. Nature, taste, and preferences of consumer do not change. 3. Prices of related goods, substitutes and complementary, do not change. 4. New substitutes of the commodity are not available. 5. Prices of good are not expected to change in near future. 6. No change in the quantity of the goods. 7. State of wealth of consumer remains constant. 8. The commodity should not be status symbol. Q. 2. Why does law of demand operate? Or why demand curve slopes downward to the right? A and S. There is inverse relationship between the price of a commodity and its quantity demanded. The demand curve slopes downward to the right due to following reasons: 1. Operation of the law of diminishing marginal utility. 2. Income effect. 3. Substitution effect. 4. Multiple use of the commodity. 5. Number of buyers. With the increase in the price, the number of buyers will decrease, and the number of buyers will increase with the decrease in its price. Q. 3. Exception to the law of demand. A and S. The law will operate only when certain assumptions are fulfilled. But there are some exception to the law of demand where the price of a commodity increases more is bought and with the decrease in price less is purchased. The slope of the demand curve will show our upward rising trend in such exception. It is clear that with the increase in price the quantity demanded will also increase and vice versa. 1. The Giffen goods. Professor Giffen has proved that with the fall in the price of inferior goods consumer will purchase less of such goods and more of superiors goods, e.g. G decreases when the price of G decreases. This law will not apply in inferior Giffen goods. 2. Scarce goods and goods of status symbol. There are certain goods which are scarce and considered as prestigious goods. Such goods are purchased by rich section of society and they are considered as status symbol. If their prices are low they will not purchase by the rich section of society, hence the law will not operate. 3. Future expectation of price changes. 4. Goods relating to necessaries of life perfectly inelastic. 5. Ignorance and laziness on the part of consumers. 6. Specific brand and trademark commodity. 7. Small part of total expenditure. 8. Speculative activities. Q.4. What is difference between extension and increase in demand and contraction and decrease in demand? A and S. Other things being equal, when the quantity demanded of a commodity changes due to change in its price, only then these changes are called extension in demand and contraction in demand. Yards contraction. When the quantity demanded of a commodity increases with the fall in the prices of that commodity it is called extension in demand. Contrary to it, when the quantity demanded of a commodity decreases due to rise in its price the demand is called contraction in demand. The contraction and extension is caused by the change in the price only. The contraction and extension in demand do not change the demand curve. Shift in demand curve, increase and decrease in demand curve. When other factors affecting the quantity demanded of commodity except the price of that commodity change the demand. The other factors are population change in price of related goods, change in income, taste, fashion of the consumer, geopolitical policy, etc. On account of the changes the demand curve may either shift to the right of the original demand curve or it may shift to the left side of the demand curve. 1. Cardinal measurement of utility is not correct. 2. Utilities of goods are not independent. 3. Money is not an exact and stable measurement. 4. Marginal utility of money does not remain constant. 5. Income effect and substitution effect are not studied. 6. Giffen goods are not studied. Chapter II. Indifference curve and consumers surplus. Subjective type questions. Q.1. An indifference curve is A convex to the origin, B concave to the origin, C inclined at an angle to the origin, D1 which goes through the origin. Correct answer A. Q.2. The slope of indifference curve shows A the price ratio, B the diminishing rate of substitution, C factor substitution, D level of indifference. Correct answer B. Q.3. When the slope of PCC is positive BET is A BT1, BT greater than 1, C BT equals 1, D BT equals 0. Correct answer A. Microeconomics theory. 33. Q.4. An indifference curve is a curve which shows different combination of two goods which yield A negative satisfaction to the consumer, B equal satisfaction to the consumer, C minimum satisfaction to the consumer, D zero satisfaction to the consumer. Correct answer B. Q.5. The doctrine of consumer surplus was developed by A. Marshall, B. Picknow, C. Robbins, D. Samuelson. Correct answer A. Q.6. The indifference curve approach is also called by another name. A. Cardinal approach, B. Ordinal approach, C. Price theory, D. Microeconomic. Correct answer B. Q.7. A consumer's demand curve can be derived from A. ICC, B. Eggles, C. PCC, D. None of the above. Correct answer C. Q.8. The Eggle curve for a Giffen good is A negative slope, C vertical. Correct answer A. B positively sloped, D horizontal. 34. Long answer type questions. Q.1. What are the indifference curves? Explain income consumption curve and price consumption curve with the help of indifference technique. A and S. Indifference curves were first introduced by the English economist F. Y. Ashworth in the 1880s. The concept was refined and used extensively by the Italian economist Vilfredo Pareto in the early 1900s. Indifference curves were popularized and greatly extended in application in the 1930s by two other English economists R. G. D. Allen and John R. Hicks. Indifference curves I.CS are a crucial tools of analysis because they are used to represent an ordinal measure of the tastes and preferences of the consumer and to show how the consumer maximizes in spending income. Indifference curves. Consumers' tastes can be examined with ordinal utility. An ordinal measure of utility is based in these assumptions. A consumer is indifferent between two goods. B. The tastes of consumers are consistent or transitive. C. More of a commodity is preferred to less. Indifference schedule. Commodities X. Commodity Y. Combination 110-26B43C71D. 1 negatively sloped and are convex to the origin because if one basket of goods X and Y contains more of X, it will have to contain less of Y than another basket in order for the two baskets to give the same level of satisfaction and be on the same indifference curve. Characteristics of indifference curves. To a higher indifference curves refers to higher level of satisfaction. Different indifference curves simply provide an ordering or ranking of the individual's preference. YAB. Y commodity. IC. OX commodity. X shows the higher level of satisfaction. Higher indifference curve shows the higher level of satisfaction. 3. Indifference curves cannot intercept. Since C is on curve I and II, it should give the same satisfaction as A and B, but this is impossible because B has more of X and Y than A. Thus indifference curves cannot intercept. 4. Diminishing rate of marginal substitution MRSX. Marginal rate of substitution of X for Y is the amount of Y which the consumer is prepared to give up for the gain of one additional unit of X so that his level of satisfaction remains the same. Q. To explain ICC and PCC. A and S. Income consumption curve and Engel curve. By changing the consumer's money income while holding prices and tastes constant, we can derive the consumer's income consumption curve. The income consumption curve is the locus of i.e. joins consumer optimum points resulting when only the consumer's income varies. From the income consumption curve we can then derive the consumer's Engel curve. Income consumption curve is shown with budget lines A, B, C, D and F. Indifference curves IC1, IC2, IC3. The individual maximizes utility at points A, B and C respectively. By joining optimum point A, B and C we get the ICC. By plotting income on vertical axis and the various optimum quantities purchased of good and along the horizontal axis, we can derive the corresponding Engel curve ABC. Income consumption curve and Engel curve. Engel curves are named after Ernst Engel, the German statistician of the second half of the 19th century who pioneered studies of family budgets and expenditure patterns. Sometimes Engel curves show the relationship between income and expenditure for various goods rather than the quantity purchased of various goods. However, prices are held constant. We get the same result, i.e. the same Engel curve. Normal and inferior goods. A normal good is one of which the consumer purchases more with an increase in income. An inferior goods is one of which the consumer purchases less with an increase in income. With budget lines JK and JK, IC curves. IC1 and IC2, the individual maximizes utility at points V and W, respectively. By joining points V and W, we get the ICC. By then plotting income on the vertical axis and the optimum quantities purchased of goods along the horizontal axis, we derive corresponding Engel curve V. WB. Since the ICC and Engel curve are negatively sloped, goods is inferior good. Price consumption curve PCC. The PCC for good X is the locus of i.e. joins consumer optimum points resulting when only the price of good X varies. From the price consumption curve we can then derive the consumer's demand curve for good X. With I equals Rs. 10 pi equals Rs1, the consumer is at an optimum at point B by purchasing 2x with Px equals Rs. To at point E by purchasing 6x with Px equals Rs.1, and at point G by purchasing 10x with Px equals Rs.0.50. By joining points Fig we get the PCC for good X in Fig B by plotting the optimum quantities of good X on the horizontal axis and the corresponding prices of good X on the vertical axis. We derive the individual negatively sloped demand curve for good X, dx. Q.3 Explain the concept of consumer's surplus and discuss its importance in economic analysis. A&S. Consumer's surplus is the difference between what a consumer is willing to pay for a good and what he or she actually pays. It results because the consumer pays for each unit of the good only as much as he or she is willing to pay for the last unit of the good, which gives less utility than earlier units. We can see how consumer surplus arises and how it can be measured with the aid of Fig. It is clear from the Fig, the difference between what the consumer is willing to pay for X Rs 5 plus Rs 4 plus Rs 3 plus Rs 2 equals Rs 14 and what he or she actually pays Rs 8 is the consumer surplus, the shaded area that equals Rs 6. If good X could be purchased in infinitesimally small units, the consumer surplus would equal the area under dx and above px equals Rs2 equals area AEB equals Rs 8. To summarize, the consumer would be willing to pay Rs 5 for the first X, Rs 4 for second X, Rs 3 for the third, and Rs 2 for the fourth, for a total of Rs 14 for all for X. Thus Rs 14 is the total benefit that the consumer receives from purchasing for X. However, if the market price is Rs2/X, the consumer can purchase all for X at a total cost of I.E by actually spending only Rs 8. Because the consumer would be willing to pay Rs 14 for the ist 4, X rather than go entirely without them but actually pays only Rs 8, he or she enjoys a net benefit or consumer surplus equal to the difference Rs 6. If excess could have been purchased in smaller and smaller fractions of a whole X, then the consumer surplus would have been given by the entire area under demand curve dx above the market price of Rs2. That is, the consumer surplus would have been the area of triangle AEB, which is 1/244 equals Rs 8. This exceeds the consumer surplus of Rs 6, that we found by adding only the shaded areas in the figures. OABC equals AEB plus OBEC. Since the consumer only pays Rs 8 OBEC, the consumer surplus is Rs 8 AEB. If Px fell to Rs 1, the consumer would purchase 5x and the consumer surplus would be Rs 12.50. The area under dx and above px equals Rs 1 in the figure if x could be purchased by infinitely small fractions of a whole x. The concept of consumer's surplus was first used by Jules Dupuit in 1844 and was subsequently refined and popularized by Alfred Marshall. That helped resolve the so-called water diamond paradox, which plagued classical economists until 1870. Why is water, which is essential for life, so cheap, while diamonds, which are not essential, so expensive? The explanation is that because water is so plentiful, relatively cheap, and we use so much of it, the utility of the last unit is very little. Washing the car, and we pay as little for all units of water as we are willing to pay for the last non-essential unit of it. On the other hand, diamonds are scarce is relation to demand, and because we use very little of them, the utility and price of them last unit are very great. The total utility and the consumer surplus from all the diamonds purchased, however, demand depends or marginal utility, not on total utility. In a desert, the first glass of water would be worth much more than any glass full of diamonds. Chapter IV. Elasticity of Demand. Subjective questions. Q.1. When the slope of PCC is positive, BEP is ABP1, BEP greater than 1, CBP equals 1, DBP equals 0. Correct answer B. Q.2. Cross elasticity of demand between two substitutes goods will be A positive, B negative, C 0, D any of the above. Correct answer A. Q.3. When is a demand curve considered as rectangular hyperbola? AE greater than 1, BE equals 1 at all points, C 1, DE equals 0. Correct answer B. Q.4. Which mathematical selection is correct? AE, CE. Correct answer B. DE. Long answer type questions. Q.1. Explain the following. By methods of measurement of elasticity of demand, II relation between AR, Mr. and elasticity of demand using proper diagram and equations. Prove that A&S.1. By methods of measurement of elasticity of demand. A. The price elasticity of demand is given by the percentage change in the quantity demanded of a commodity divided by the percentage change in its price. Letting degree letter A to stand for the coefficient of price elasticity of demand. Q for the change the quantity demanded and P for the change in price. We have the formula for the price elasticity of demand. Q/QQ.PP/PPQ. Since quantity and price move in opposite directions, the value of is negative. To compare price elasticities, however, we use their absolute value i.e. their value without the negative sign. B. Point elasticity of demand, or the elasticity at a particular point on the demand curve. More frequently we are interested in the price elasticity between 2 points on the demand curve. We then calculate the arc elasticity of demand. We use the average of the two prices and the average of the two quantities in heat calculations, letting P1 refers to the higher of the two prices with Q. The quantity at P1 and P2 refer to the lower of the two prices with Q2 the corresponding quantities. We have the formula for arc elasticity of demand. The price elasticity of demand is usually different at and between different points on the demand curve, and it can range anywhere from 0 to very large or infinite. Demand is said to be elastic if the absolute value of equals 1, and inelastic if the absolute value of is smaller than 1. 1. Price elasticity graphically : we can also measure graphically the price elasticity at any point on a linear or nonlinear demand curve, and it can range anywhere from 0 to very large. To measure the price elasticity at point E on the X in the left panel of figure 5.2, we proceed as follows. We draw tangent ADH to point E on the X and drop perpendicular EJ to the quantity axis. The slope of tangent line ADH is negative and constant throughout and can be measured by. The ist component of the price elasticity formula is the inverse of the slope of the demand curve for. The second component of the price elasticity formula is components of the elasticity formula. We have equals. Reassembling the two. Price elasticity and total expenditure. An important relationship exists between the price elasticity of demand and the total expenditure of consumers on the commodity. This relationship is often used in economics. It postulates that a decline in the commodity price results in an increase in total expenditure unchanged, if demand is elastic. Leaves total expenditure unchanged if demand is unitary elastic, and results in a decline in total expenditure if demand is inelastic. Demand curve dx has unitary elasticity throughout. Thus, equals JH/OJ equals 6/6 equals 1 at point E, equals LJ/OL equals 3/3 equals 1 at point B1, and equals HN/O equals 12/12 equals 1 at point G1. Total expenditure PQ are the same bars. 6 at every point on D*. This demand curve is a rectangular hyperbola. Income elasticity of demand. As we know that Engel curve is showing the amount of a commodity that a consumer would purchase per unit of time at various income levels, while holding price and tastes constant. We can measure the responsiveness or sensitivity in the quantity demanded of a commodity at any point on the Engel curve by the income elasticity of demand. A commodity is normal if I is less than 1, and as a luxury if I is greater than $1. In the real world, most broadly defined commodities such as food, clothing, housing, healthcare, education, and recreation are normal goods. Inferior goods are usually narrowly defined in expenditure. Goods such as ammonia, for which good substitutes are available, among normal goods. Food and clothing are necessities, while education and recreation are luxuries. Income elasticity and classification of good X. Classification: luxury, necessity inferior. Cross elasticity of demand. Commodities X and Y are substitutes if more of X is purchased when the price of Y goes up. For e.g., consumers usually purchase more coffee when the price of tea rises. The coffee and tea are substitutes. Other examples of substitutes include butter and margarine, hamburgers and hot dogs, Coca-Cola and Pepsi, electricity and gas, and so on. On the other hand, commodities X and Y are complements if less of X is purchased when the price of Y goes up. Thus lemons and tea are complements. Other examples of commodities that are complements are coffee and cream, hamburgers and buns, hot dogs and mustard, cars and gasoline, and so on. An increase in the price of a commodity leads a reduction in the quantity demanded of the commodity. The movement along the demand curve for the commodity but causes the demand curve for substitute to shift to the right and the demand curve for a complement to shift to the left. For example, an increase in the price of tea will cause the demand for coffee, the substitute of tea, to shift to the right so that more coffee is demanded at each coffee price, and the demand for lemons, a complement of tea, to shift to the left so that fewer lemons are demanded at each lemon price. We can measure the responsiveness or sensitivity in the quantity purchased of commodities X as a result of change in the price of commodity Y by the cross-elasticity of demand at XY. This is given by XY equals, where Qx is the change in the quantity purchase of X, pi is the change in the price of Y. Pi is the original price of Y, and Qx is the original quantity of X. In measuring XY, we hold constant Px, consumers' incomes, their taste, and the number of consumers in the market. If XY is greater than 0, X and Y are substitutes, because an increase in pi leads to an increase in Qx as X is substituted for Y in consumption. On the other hand, if an X is less than 0, X and Y are complements, because an increase in pi leads to reduction in Q and Qx. The absolute value, i.e., the value without the sign of the cross-elasticity of demand, measures the degree of substitution or complementary. If an X is close to 0, X and R independent commodities. This may be the case with cars and pencils, telephones and chewing gum, pocket calculators, and beer, and so on. Relationship among marginal revenues, price and elasticity. Let P and Q equal the price and the quantity of a commodity respectively. There the total revenue of the seller of the commodity TR is given by TR equals PQ, I, and the marginal revenue is Mr. equals. Manipulating expression I mathematically, we get Mr. equals P. Where is the coefficient of price elasticity of demand? For example, if P equals Rs.12 and equals 3, Mr. equals Rs. 8. If equals P equals Mr. equals Rs. 12, or Mr. equals P plus, or Mr. equals AR since P equals AR. Chapter V. Production Theory. Subjective types questions. Q.1. The line joining points of consumers' equilibrium resulting when only the consumer's income is varied is called A. The demand curve, B. The income consumption curve, C. The angle curve, D. The price consumption curve. Correct answer B. Q.2. Within the relevant range isoquants are A. Negatively sloped, B. Convex to the origin, C. Cannot cut each other, D. All of the above. Correct answer D. Q.3. The cost that a firm incurs in purchasing any factors of production is referred to as A. Explicit cost, B. Implicit cost, C. Variable cost, D. Fixed cost. Correct answer C. Q.4. When the demand curve is elastic, mistress, A1, B0, C positive, D negative. Correct answer C. Q.5. The concept of transfer earnings is associated with A. Theory of monopolistic, B. The theory of interest, microeconomics theory, C. The modern theory of rent. Correct answer C. D. The theory of profit. Q.6. All the following curves are U-shaped except A. The AC curve, B. The AFC curve, C. The AC curve, D. The MC curve. Correct answer B. Q.7. Given the supply of a commodity in the market period, the price of a commodity is determined by A. The market demand curve alone, B. The market supply curve alone, C. The market demand curve and market supply curve, D. None of the above. Correct answer C. Q.8. When are the perfectly competitive firm and industry both in long-run equilibrium? A. P equals Mr. equals SMC equals LMCBP equals Mr. equals SAC equals LAC CP equals Mr. equals lowest point on the LAC curve, D. All of the above. Correct answer D. Q.9. Slope of isoquant is equal to AM RDS LKCL/K. Correct answer A. Long answer type question. B plural /park DQ/L. Q.1. Explain the three stages of production. Why is it that the second stage of production is considered the most relevant stage for factor use in production? Discuss using suitable diagram. A&S. Production refers to the transformation of resources into outputs of goods and service. The output of a firm can either be a final commodity such as automobiles or an intermediate product such as steel which is used in the production of automobiles and other goods. The output can also be service rather than a good. Classification of inputs. Firms transform inputs into outputs. Inputs, resources or factors of production are the means of producing the goods and services demanded by society. Inputs can be classified broadly into labor or human resources including entrepreneurial talent, capital or investment goods, and land or natural resources. Particularly important among input is entrepreneurship, which refers to the ability of some individuals to see opportunities to combine resources in new and more efficient ways to produce a particular commodity or to produce entirely new commodities. The motivation is the great profit possibilities that an entrepreneur may believe to exist. The entrepreneur either uses his or her resources to exploit these profit opportunities or more likely attempts to convince other people with large sum of money to put some of that money at his or her disposal to introduce new production technique or new product and share in the potential profits. Inputs can be further classified into fixed and variable. Fixed inputs are those that cannot be varied or can be varied only with excessive cost during the time period under consideration. Examples of fixed inputs are firms, plant and specialized equipment. Variable inputs, on the other hand, are those that can be varied easily and on short notice during the time period under consideration. Examples of these are raw materials and many types of workers, particularly those with low levels of skills. Thus, whether an input is fixed or variable depends on the time horizon being considered. This time period during which at least one input is fixed is called the short run, and the time period during which all inputs are varied is called the long run. Production with one variable input. We are dealing with the short run when only one input is variable. Total average and marginal product. A production function is a unique relationship between inputs and outputs. It can be represented by a table, a graph or an equation, and shows the maximum output of a commodity that can be produced per period of time with each set of inputs. Both output and inputs are measured in physical rather than monetary units. Technology is assumed to remain constant. A simple short-run production function is obtained by applying various amounts of labor to form 1 acre of land and recording the resulting output toward total product TP per period of time. This is illustrated by the first two columns of table. Table. Average and marginal product in the cultivation of wheat on 1 acre of land. Labor output toward total product TPL. 0 0 13 28 3 12 4 14 5 14 6 12. Average product and APL marginal product or MPL. Negative 33 45 44 3.5 to 2.80 to negative 2. The second column of table shows, with 1 unit of labor LLTP equals 3 units of wheat, and with 2 LTP equals 8 units of wheat, and so on. The total physical output toward total product TP divided by the quantity of labor employed to equals the average product of labor APL. On the other hand, the change in output toward total product per unit change in the quantity of labor employed is equal to the marginal product of labor MP. Column 3 in table gives the APL column 2 divided by Col.1 the MPL in Col. 4S obtained by subtracting successive quantities of the TP in Col. 2. Plotting the total average and marginal product quantities of table gives the corresponding product curve shown in figure. 7. The APL given by the slope of the line from the origin to a point on the TP curves rises up to point H and declines thereafter but remains positive as long as TP is positive. The MPL given by the slope of the tangent to the TP curve rises up to point G becomes 0 at I and is negative thereafter. When the APL curve rises, the MPL is above it. Where the APL falls, the MPL is below it, and when APL is highest, MPL equals APL. The law of diminishing returns. The decline in the MPL curve in Fig is a reflection of the law of diminishing returns. This is an empirical generalization or a physical law, not a proposition of economics. It postulates that as more units of a variable inputs are used with a fixed amount of other inputs, after a point, the smaller and smaller return will accrue to each additional unit of the variable input. This occurs because each additional unit of the variable input has less and less of the fixed inputs with which to work. In figure, the law of diminishing return for L begins to operate from point GII stage. Further additions of L will eventually lead to 0 and then to negative MPLII stage. So stage II is considered most relevant stage for factor use in production. Q. To explain the following: II sequence, II returns to scale, II least cost combination. They and S. II sequence, an ISO quant shows the various combinations of two inputs, say, labor and capital, that can be used to produce a specific level of output. The higher isoquant refers to a larger output, whereas a lower isoquant refers to a smaller output. If the two variable inputs, labor and capital, are the only inputs used in production, we are in the long run. If the two variable inputs are used with other fixed inputs, say land, we would still be in the short run. Characteristics of isoquants: they are negatively sloped in the economically relevant range, are convex to the origin. All points on an isoquant refer to the same level of output. Higher isoquant refers to a larger output. They cannot cut each other. Marginal rate of technical substitution in figure between point M and point N on the isoquant for 12 units of output 12Q. The marginal rate of technical substitution of labor for capital MRTSLK equals 2.5 between point N and C. MRTSLK equals 1/2. That point N, MRTSLK equals 1, the absolute slope if the tangent to the isoquant N. The MRTSLK is also equal to MPL/MPK. As we know that all points on an isoquant refer to the same level of output. Thus for a movement down a given isoquant, the gain in output from using more labor must be equal to the loss in output from using less capital. Specifically, the increase in the quantity of labor used, L times the marginal product of labor MPL, must equal the reduction in the amount of capital used, K, times the marginal product of capital MPK. That is, LMPL equals KMPK. So that thus MRTSLK is equal to the absolute value of the slope of the isoquant and to the ratio of the marginal productivities. Economic region of production: the firm would not operate on the positively sloped portion of an isoquant because it could produce the same level of output with less capital and less labor. Isoquants are positively sloped to the right of ridgeline OB and to the left of or above ridgeline OA. The firm would never produce at a point such as 4S in the positively sloped portion of the isoquant because it could produce the same output with less of both inputs. For e.g., the firm would not produce 34Q at point P in Fig because it could produce 34Q by using the smaller quantity of labor and indicated by point R. Similarly, the firm would not produce 34Q at point T in the less L and K since input are not free. The firm would not want to produce in the positively sloped range of isoquants. Ridge lines separate the relevant, i.e. negatively sloped, from the irrelevant or the positively sloped portions of the isoquants. Thus we conclude that the negatively sloped portion of the isoquant within a ridge line represents the economic region of production where the MPL and MPK are both positive but declining. Producer will never want to operate. They and S. II returns to scale. The word scale refers to the long-run situation where all inputs are changed in the same proportion. The result might be constant, increasing or decreasing returns. Constant returns to scale refers to the situation where output changes by the same proportion as inputs. For example, if all inputs are increased by 10%, output also rises by 10%. Increasing returns to scale refers to the case where output changes by a larger proportion than inputs. For e.g., if all inputs are increased by 10%, output increases by more than 10%. If all inputs are doubled, output more than doubles. Finally, in the decreasing returns to scale, output changes by a smaller proportion than inputs. Thus increasing all inputs by 10% increases output by less than 10% and doubling all inputs less than doubles all inputs. They and SII least cost combination or choice of optimal factor combination or producer's equilibrium. A profit maximization's firm faces two choices of optimal combination of factors: inputs, first to minimize its cost for a given output and second to maximize its output for a given cost. Thus the least cost combination of factors refers to a firm producing the largest volume of output from a given cost when the factors are combined in an optimum manner. Cost minimization for a given output. In the theory of production, the profit maximization firm will choose that combination which minimizes its cost of production for given output. This will be the optimal combination for it. Assumptions. 1. There are two factors, labor and capital. 2. All units of labor and capital are homogeneous. 3. The prices of units of labor W and that of capital are given and constant. 4. The cost outlay is given. 5. The firm produces a single product. 6. The product is given and constant. 7. The firm aims at profit maximization. 8. There is perfect competition in the factor market. Given these assumptions, the point of least cost combination of factors for a given level of output is where the isoquant curve is tangent to an ISO cost line. The ISO cost line GH is tangent to the isoquant 200 at point M. The firm employs the combination of OC of capital and OL of labor to produce 200 units of output at point M with a given cost outlay GH. At this point the firm is minimizing its cost for producing 200 units. Any other combination on the isoquant 200 such as R or T is on the higher ISO cost line KP, which shows higher cost of production. The ISO cost line EG shows lower cost but output 200 cannot be attained with it. There the firm will choose the minimum cost point M, which is the least cost factor combination for producing 200 units of output. M is thus the optional combination for the firm. I.E. the slope of the ISO quant curve is equal to the marginal rate of technical substitution of labor and capital MRTSLK, which in turn equal to the ratio of the MP of L and MP of K. Microeconomics theory. Chapter VI. Different markup structure. Subjective type question. Q.1. Which of the following formulae is used to know average revenue? A. Mr/Q. BTR/Q. CTR/Q. D. Mr** Q. Correct answer B. Q.2. Marginal revenue can be A positive C0. Correct answer D. B negative D. All of the above. Q.3. Who determines price under perfect competition? A. Firm. B. Industry. C. Customer. D. Government. Correct answer B. Q.4. What can a monopolist get in a long period? A. Normal profit. B. Supernormal profit. C. Loss. D. All the three. Correct answer B. Q.5. Consumers are likely to get a variety of goods under A. Monopoly. B. Perfect competition. C. Oligopoly. D. Monopolistic competition. Correct answer D. Q.6. The economics of imperfect competition is associated with A. Marshall. B. J. Robinson. C. Ricardo. D. J. M. Keynes. 62. Correct answer B. Q.7. The lack curve falls as output expands. This is due to A. Economies of scale. B. The law of diminishing returns. C. Diseconomies of scale. D. None of the above. Correct answer A. Q.8. All of the following curves are U-shaped except A. The ABC curve. B. The AFC curve. C. The AC curve. D. The MC curve. Correct answer B. Q.9. At the optimum level of output for the pure monopolist. A. Mr. equals SMC. BP equals SMC. CP equals lowest SAC. DP is highest. Correct answer A. Long answer type question. Q.1. Point out the difference between a firm and industry. Discuss the equilibrium of a firm in short run and long run under perfect competition. A and S. A firm is in equilibrium when it has no tendency to change its level of output. It needs neither expansion nor contraction. It is earning maximum profits in equilibrium by equating its marginal cost with its marginal revenue. Diagrammatically, the conditions of equilibrium of the firm are I. The MC curve must equal the Mr. curve. This is the order and necessary condition. But this is not a sufficient condition which may be fulfilled yet. The form may not be in equilibrium to the MC curve must cut the Mr. curve from below. And after the point of equilibrium it must be above the Mr. This is second order condition. An Industry is in equilibrium, firstly when there is no tendency for the firms rather to leave or enter the industry, and secondly when each firm is also in equilibrium. The first condition implies that the AC curve coincide with the AR curves of all the firms in industry. An industry is a group of all firms. They are earning only normal profits, which are supposed to be included in the AC curves of the firms. The second condition implies the equality of MC and Mr. under a perfectly competitive industry. These two conditions must be satisfied at the point of equilibrium, i.e. Mr. equals MC, AC equals AR equals Mr. MC equals AC equals AR. Such a situation represents full equilibrium of the industry. Equilibrium under perfect competition. Perfect competition refers to the type of market organization in which 1. There are many buyers and sellers of a commodity, each too small to affect the price of the commodity. 2. The commodity is homogeneous identical. 3. There is perfectly mobility of resources, and 4. Economic agents have perfect knowledge of market conditions, i.e. prices and cost. Price determination in the market period. The market period or the very short run refers to the time period during which no input can be varied, i.e. all costs are fixed, and so the market supply of a commodity is also fixed. The market period may be a day, a week, a month, or longer depending on the industry. During the market period, costs of production are irrelevant in the determination of price, and the entire stock of a perishable commodity is put up for sale at whatever price it can fetch. Thus, with perfect competition among buyers and sellers, demand alone determines price while supply alone determines quantity. In Fig, with the quantity supplies fixed at O and the market supply curve of the commodity is at M with D2 as the market demand curve, the equilibrium price is P2. At higher price than P2 there will be unsold quantities, and this will cause the price to fall to the equilibrium level. At price below P2 the quantity demanded exceeds the quantity supplied, and the price will be up to P2. With D3 as the demand curve, P equals P3. With D1 as the demand curve, P equals P1. Intersection of demand and supply curves are equilibrium points respectively, E2, E3 and E1. Short-run equilibrium of the firm. Total approach: maximizing the positive difference between total revenue and total costs. The equilibrium output of the firm is the output that maximizes the total profits of the firm. Total profits equal total revenue minus total costs. Thus total profits are maximized where the positive difference between total revenue and total cost is largest. Short-run equilibrium of the firm total approach. The TR curve is a straight line through the origin with slope of P equals Rs.35 at Q equals 0, TR equals 0 and STC equals Rs30. So that total profits are Rs30 and equal the firm's TFC at bottom panel at Q equals 1, TR equals Rs35 and STC equals Rs50, so that total profits are Rs15 at Q equals 1.5, TR equals STC equals Rs.50 to .50, so and the total profits are 0. This is break-even point. Between Q equals 1.5 and Q equals 5, TR exceeds STC and the firm earns positive economic profits. Total profits are greatest at Rs. 31.50 when Q equals 3.5 and the TR and the STC curves are parallel at Q equals 5, TR equals STC equals Rs. 175, so that total profits are 0.B and B1 at greater than 5. TR is smaller than STC and the firm incurs a loss. Total